The evening was quiet, the air heavy with the smell of dust and gasoline near the edge of the small town. On one side of the road stood an old wooden stall made of rusty sheets and worn-out planks. There, a poor young girl worked every day after school, selling small handmade crafts and snacks to people who passed by. She was dressed in simple clothes, her hands rough from work, but her heart was full of kindness. She didn't have much, yet she always smiled at everyone who came by. That night, the sky turned orange as the sun began to set behind the distant hills. The road was almost empty, and the girl was just about to close her small stall when she heard a loud noise in the distance. A screech of tires, followed by a thunderous crash. For a moment, everything went silent again, and then she saw thick black smoke rising into the sky. Her heart began to race. She dropped everything and ran toward the sound. When she reached the scene, she saw a car turned on its side, flames beginning to spread near the hood. Through the cracked glass, she could see a boy trapped inside, crying and struggling to open the door. The road was deserted, no one was there to help. Fear filled her mind, but she didn't think twice. She looked around desperately for something to help and found a broken stick and an old cloth. Covering her face with the cloth, she rushed toward the burning car. The heat was unbearable. The fire was spreading fast, and the smell of burning metal filled the air. She shouted for help, but no one answered. The boy inside was coughing, his face pale and frightened. Without hesitation, she hit the window with the stick again and again until the glass cracked. Flames jumped higher, and the sound of popping tires echoed in the air. Still, she didn't stop. Finally, the glass gave way. She reached inside, pulled the door handle, and somehow managed to drag the boy out. Her arms burned from the heat, and her clothes were covered in soot, but she didn't care. All she could think about was getting the boy away from the fire. She carried him to the side of the road, gasping for breath. The boy was trembling and crying, clutching her hand tightly. Moments later, a black luxury car stopped nearby. A man in a suit rushed out, his eyes wide with fear. It was the boy's father, a well-known billionaire from the city who was returning from a business trip. He had been driving a little behind and saw the smoke. When he realized what had happened, his world froze. Seeing his only son lying on the ground and a poor girl beside him, both covered in dirt and ashes, he couldn't move. He ran to his son, held him tightly, and looked at the girl in disbelief. "Who did this? Who saved him?" he asked, his voice shaking. The boy pointed toward her weakly, his voice barely a whisper. "She did. She saved me." The billionaire looked at the girl again. Her face was smudged, her clothes torn, and her hands were bleeding. She stood there silently, her eyes calm and kind. For a long moment, he didn't say anything. The only sound around them was the crackling fire behind and the distant sirens approaching. When the paramedics arrived, they took the boy to the hospital. The girl tried to walk away quietly, not wanting any attention or praise. But the man stopped her. "Wait," he said softly, "please tell me your name." She simply shook her head and said, "It doesn't matter, sir. I'm just glad your son is safe." Before he could say anything more, she disappeared into the crowd that had gathered. The billionaire stood there watching her go, speechless. For the first time in years, he felt something deep inside, a mix of gratitude, guilt, and admiration. All his wealth, his cars, his power, none of it mattered at that moment. The person who had saved his son had nothing but courage and heart. As the flames behind them slowly died down, he realized that sometimes the richest people are not the ones with money, but the ones who carry kindness in their hearts. That night would stay with him forever. He didn't know who that girl was or where she came from, but he knew one thing: his life and his heart would never be the same again. The night after the accident, the poor girl sat outside her small home made of tin sheets and wood. Her mother was inside, coughing softly, trying to rest after another long day. The girl stared at her burned hands, still bandaged with an old cloth. The fire's heat and the boy's frightened face kept flashing in her mind. She hadn't told anyone what happened, not even her mother. She didn't do it for praise or reward. She did it because deep down she knew what it felt like to be helpless. A few days passed. The newspapers and TV channels were filled with stories about a mystery girl who saved the son of a famous billionaire from a burning car. The billionaire had publicly announced that he wanted to find her and thank her personally. But the girl didn't watch TV or read newspapers. She continued working at her stall every evening, the same way she always had, unaware of the attention her act of courage had created. Meanwhile, at a luxurious mansion on the other side of the city, the billionaire sat by his son's hospital bed. The boy had minor injuries, but his mind was haunted by the fire. He often woke up crying, remembering the girl who had saved him. "Father," he said one day, "she was so brave. She didn't even care about herself." The billionaire's heart tightened. He had built his empire on numbers, deals, and success, but he had forgotten what it meant to feel compassion. For the first time, he felt powerless. All his money couldn't buy what that girl had: courage and heart. He asked his team to search every nearby village to find her. Posters were put up, news spread quickly, but no one knew who she was. The girl had quietly vanished into her simple life again. A week later, fate brought them together once more. The billionaire's car broke down near the outskirts of town. While waiting for help, he noticed a small stall nearby where a young girl was selling handmade bracelets and keychains. Something about her posture, her eyes, it felt familiar. He walked closer, and when she looked up, he froze. It was her. She recognized him too, but quickly looked away, nervous. "You're the girl from the accident," he said softly. She nodded but didn't speak. "Why did you walk away that night?" he asked. She shrugged gently, her voice quiet and honest. "Because I didn't save him for a reward, sir. I just wanted him safe." The billionaire's eyes softened. He couldn't believe how humble and pure her heart was. "At least let me help you," he insisted. "You risked your life for my son. I can't let that go unnoticed." But she shook her head. "I don't need help," she replied. "There are many others who need it more than me." Her words struck him deeply. For years he had measured people by their worth in money, by what they owned or what they could give him in return. But now, standing before this girl with nothing but a kind soul, he realized how wrong he had been. He sat down on a wooden stool beside her small stall and spoke for a long time. The people passing by were surprised to see a man like him, known for his power and pride, sitting beside a poor girl in the street. But he didn't care. He wanted to understand her life, her struggles, her dreams. She told him about her mother's illness, her small school, and how she worked every evening to buy medicine and food. As she spoke, his heart grew heavy. He had everything: a mansion, cars, wealth, but he had never known such strength. Her courage came from love, not from what she had, but from what she felt for others. When he returned home that evening, his mind was no longer the same. He couldn't sleep. He kept seeing her face, covered in soot and tears, pulling his son out of the fire. He realized he wanted to do something meaningful, something that truly mattered. The next day, he made a quiet promise to himself. He wouldn't just thank her, he would change her life just like she had changed his heart. But he wanted to do it in a way that wouldn't hurt her pride. He called his team and began working on a plan, one that would bring light into her world, just as she had brought life back into his son's. That night, as the poor girl packed up her stall, she looked up at the stars and smiled faintly. She didn't know that her life was about to take a turn she could never have imagined. The next morning, the poor girl returned to her small stall as usual. The sky was cloudy and a cool breeze brushed her face. She arranged the few items she had made the night before: simple bracelets, wooden keychains, and tiny handmade flowers. To her, this little stall wasn't just a business. It was her world, her only hope to support her sick mother. She didn't know that someone far more powerful was watching over her quietly from a distance. The billionaire had kept his promise. Without telling her, he had started gathering information about her situation. He learned that she lived in a small shack near the old railway tracks, that her mother was very ill, and that they barely managed to afford food or medicine. The realization broke his heart. How could someone with so little still have the courage to risk everything for a stranger? That evening, he made a phone call to one of his managers. "I want a small school rebuilt in that area," he said. "And I want a few stalls near the road fixed up. Do it quietly. No one should know I'm behind it." His voice was calm but filled with emotion. This wasn't charity. It was gratitude. A few weeks later, the girl noticed strange changes happening around her. The broken road near her stall was being repaired. Her stall, once old and shaky, was replaced with a new wooden one, painted beautifully with bright colors. She stood there confused, wondering who had done it. When she asked the workers, they said it was part of a community project. She smiled, not knowing that the man she had once saved was the reason behind it all. Her business started to grow. More people stopped by, drawn by the improved road and her cheerful smile. She earned enough to buy better medicine for her mother, and for the first time in years, their small home didn't feel as heavy with worry. Still, she remained humble and thankful. One afternoon, as she was helping an old man choose a bracelet, a luxury car pulled up nearby. The door opened and the billionaire stepped out holding a small box in his hand. She looked up, surprised but not frightened. He smiled gently and walked toward her. "I came to buy something," he said softly. She nodded and handed him one of her bracelets. "This one," he said. "I think it'll remind me of something important." As he paid, he placed the small box on her table and said, "This is just a small thank you. Please don't say no this time." She looked down at the box and slowly opened it. Inside was a golden necklace with a simple heart pendant. It wasn't flashy, just elegant. "I can't accept this," she whispered. But he gently replied, "You already gave me something more precious than this. You gave me my son back." Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't want to cry in front of him. "I only did what anyone should do," she said quietly. "You don't owe me anything." The billionaire looked at her for a long moment and said, "Maybe not. But sometimes gratitude is not about owing, it's about remembering what truly matters." Before leaving, he asked, "Would you mind if I visited your mother? I'd like to thank her too for raising such a brave daughter." She hesitated, then nodded politely. That evening, for the first time, a luxury car stopped in front of their tiny home. Her mother was surprised but welcomed him kindly. They talked for hours. The billionaire listened to her mother's stories about hardship, about raising her daughter alone and how proud she was of her. When he left that night, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: peace. The world he lived in was full of greed and selfishness, but here, in this small home, he had found something pure and real. The next few days, things continued to improve for the girl. More people came to her stall. Her mother's health started getting better. Life, once full of struggle, slowly began to shine again. She often wondered how everything had changed so suddenly, unaware that the man she once saved had quietly become her guardian angel. On the other side of the city, the billionaire watched her progress from afar. He didn't want fame or credit. He simply wanted her to have the life she deserved, a life she had earned through bravery and kindness. But destiny wasn't done yet. Something even more emotional was waiting ahead, something that would bring both their worlds together forever. Days turned into weeks, and life seemed calmer for the poor girl. Her small stall was now busier than ever, and her mother's health had improved. She often wondered how so many good things had started happening after that terrible night. She believed it was simply God's blessing for doing something right. But deep inside, she still remembered the boy she had saved and hoped he was recovering well. One morning, while she was setting up her stall, a little boy ran up to her with a bright smile. He looked familiar. Before she could even think, he hugged her tightly and said, "It's you." "You're the one who saved me!" She froze for a second and then recognized him. It was the same boy from the burning car. The boy's father, the billionaire, followed behind slowly. He looked calm but emotional. "I'm sorry for showing up like this," he said softly. "My son wouldn't stop asking to see you again." The girl smiled kindly at the boy, who now seemed full of life and joy. "I'm happy you're safe," she said. The billionaire watched her closely. There was something different about her. She spoke with such grace and honesty despite having so little. "We wanted to invite you to our home," he said gently. "It's just a small dinner. My family wants to thank you properly." She hesitated at first. The idea of going to such a big house made her nervous. But her mother encouraged her later that evening, saying, "Sometimes when life gives you kindness, you should accept it, my child. You've already given so much. Let others give too." A few days later, a car arrived to take her to the city. She wore her best dress, simple but clean, and carried a small handmade bracelet as a gift. When she reached the mansion, she was speechless. The place was enormous, with shining marble floors and chandeliers that sparkled like stars. But what caught her attention wasn't the luxury. It was how warmly the billionaire and his family welcomed her. The boy held her hand and said, "Come, I want to show you my room." He took her upstairs, proudly showing his toys and drawings. One drawing stopped her in her tracks. It was a picture of her, pulling him out of the burning car. Below it, the boy had written, "My hero." Tears filled her eyes. She couldn't believe how much she meant to this little boy. At dinner, the billionaire's wife smiled and thanked her too. "You gave me my family back," she said, holding her hand. "No words can ever repay that." The girl felt shy but grateful. "I didn't do anything special," she replied softly. Anyone would have done the same. After dinner, the billionaire asked her to join him in his study. The room was filled with books and family photos. He stood by the window for a moment, then turned toward her with a deep breath. "There's something I need to tell you," he said. "All the changes around your home, the repaired road, the new stall, the help for your mother, that was me." She looked at him, speechless. "You?" she whispered. "But why didn't you tell me?" He smiled gently. "Because I didn't want you to think it was out of pity. You gave me something priceless, my son's life, and my own heart back. I only wanted to make your life a little easier." Her eyes filled with tears. "You didn't have to do all that," she said quietly. "Your gratitude was enough." He shook his head. "No. What you did reminded me that life isn't about money or power. It's about kindness. I spent years chasing success and forgot what it meant to truly feel. You reminded me of that." For a long moment there was silence. Then he handed her a small envelope. "This isn't a reward," he said. "It's a chance. Inside is a scholarship and support for your education and your mother's medical care. You deserve to dream bigger." She stared at the envelope, unable to speak. I don't know what to say," she finally whispered. "Just promise me one thing," he said, smiling, "that you'll never stop being who you are." That night, as she returned home, her mother saw the joy on her face. She held the envelope tightly against her chest, tears of gratitude glistening in her eyes. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like a poor girl. She felt seen, valued, and respected. And somewhere deep in her heart, she knew this wasn't just about saving a boy from a fire. It was about how one brave act could change hearts forever, hers and theirs alike. Months passed since the night she visited the billionaire's mansion, and life for the poor girl began to transform in ways she could never have imagined. The scholarship he had given her allowed her to attend a good school in the city. Every morning she wore her clean uniform, her books neatly packed, her heart filled with quiet determination. She never forgot where she came from, and every evening after classes, she still stopped by her old stall to help her mother and the few customers who still came by to see her. Her mother's health improved steadily. With better medicine and care, her cough became lighter and her smile returned. The house, once falling apart, was repaired and painted in soft colors by volunteers the billionaire had secretly arranged. But what touched the girl most wasn't the help. It was the way it all happened quietly, with respect for her dignity. No one treated her as poor anymore. People admired her courage, her humility, and her strength. Meanwhile, the billionaire and his family never forgot her either. The boy often asked about her and would send small gifts, handwritten notes, drawings or books, thanking her for saving 2 lives instead of 1. One day, the billionaire visited her school as a guest speaker. When he saw her among the students, listening carefully from the back row, his heart swelled with pride. He spoke about humanity, kindness, and how one brave act could teach even the richest man the true value of life. Though he didn't mention her name, everyone knew who had inspired his words. After the event, he met her outside. "You've grown a lot," he said, smiling warmly. "Not just in age, but in spirit." She smiled back shyly. "I just want to make something of my life, sir. For my mother, and for everyone who believed in me." He nodded. "And you will. You already have." Over time, she finished school and received an offer to attend a university. She was hesitant at first. She didn't want to leave her mother alone, but her mother held her hands and said, "Go, my child. You have wings now. It's time to fly." Tears filled her eyes, but she knew her mother was right. She moved to the city for her studies, living in a small hostel and visiting home whenever she could. Life was challenging, but she was used to struggle. The difference now was that she had hope. She studied hard, spending late nights reading and writing essays about kindness, courage, and humanity, the very things that had changed her life. Years later, she graduated with honors. The day of the ceremony, the billionaire and his family were invited as special guests. As her name was called on stage, she walked slowly, her hands trembling but her heart calm. The crowd clapped loudly. When she turned to look, she saw the billionaire and his family standing, applauding her with tears in their eyes. The moment felt unreal. After the ceremony, he came to her and said softly, "You did it. You've made everyone proud." She smiled, her eyes shining. "I couldn't have done it without your help," she said. But he shook his head. You did it because you had courage when no one else did. I only walked the path you lit for me." Years continued to pass, and the girl, once known for her small roadside stall, began working as a social worker. She helped children from poor neighborhoods get education and support. She often visited villages, telling her story not as a tale of luck, but as proof that even one act of kindness can change lives forever. Her story spread across newspapers and social media, inspiring thousands. Yet she never sought attention. She stayed humble, the same girl who once sold bracelets under the sun. One day she received a letter. It was from the billionaire's son, the same boy she had once pulled from the flames. He was grown up now, studying abroad. The letter read, "I don't remember much from that night, but I remember your face. Every time life gets hard, I think of your courage. And I tell myself that if a girl with nothing could risk her life for someone she didn't know, then I can face anything. You didn't just save me, you gave me strength. Thank you for changing my life." Reading those words brought tears to her eyes. She kept that letter safe, a reminder that her pain, her struggles, and her choices had all meant something. A few months later, the billionaire invited her and her mother to a special event, a charity foundation opening. When they arrived, she saw a large sign at the entrance, the Hope Foundation, inspired by a girl's courage. Her heart stopped for a moment. She turned to him, her eyes wide with disbelief. He smiled and said, "This foundation will help thousands of poor children get education and health care. I wanted the world to know the story that changed my heart." She stood there silently, overwhelmed. "You didn't have to name it after me," she whispered. "But I wanted to," he replied, "because you showed me that true wealth isn't what we own. It's what we give." That night, as the lights from the event faded and the stars filled the sky, she stood outside quietly with her mother. The wind was gentle, carrying the faint sound of music and laughter from the hall. Her mother looked at her and said, "You see, my child, one brave moment changed everything, not just for you, but for many others." The girl nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "I never thought my life would mean something to anyone," she said softly. Her mother smiled, touching her face. "You were born to make a difference. Sometimes we go through pain so we can bring light to others." As time went on, she continued working with the foundation. She traveled to villages, built schools, and met children whose stories reminded her of her own. The billionaire remained in touch, treating her and her mother like family. Whenever they met, they spoke not of money or success, but of life, kindness, and faith. Years later, when she stood on a stage to tell her story at a global event, she said something that made the entire audience fall silent. "I was once called a poor girl," she said, her voice calm and steady. "But today I realize that true poverty isn't the lack of money, it's the lack of compassion. That night when I saw a boy trapped in a burning car, I didn't think of who he was or what I would gain. I only thought about saving a life. And in doing so, I found my own purpose." The crowd gave her a standing ovation. Some people cried, others smiled. The billionaire, sitting in the front row, wiped a tear from his eye. His heart was full. He knew that the girl who once saved his son had not only saved his family but had gone on to save countless others. As the lights dimmed and the event ended, she stood near the window, looking at the city lights below. The same sky that had once witnessed her struggles now shone above her with pride. She whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude for the journey, for her mother, for the boy she saved, and for the miracle of kindness that had changed so many lives. She was no longer the poor girl from the roadside stall. She was a symbol of courage, compassion, and hope, a reminder that one act of love can ignite a chain of miracles. And as the billionaire watched her from afar, he thought to himself, "That night I lost faith in everything when I saw the fire, but she gave it back to me. Because of her, I learned what it truly means to live." And from that day on, her story lived in every life she touched, forever proving that sometimes the smallest hands can carry the greatest hearts. A